The telegram arrived just before sunrise, carried by a rider whose horse looked ready to collapse from exhaustion. The man didn't say a word when he reached the ranch. He simply handed me the folded paper, tipped his hat, and turned his horse back toward town. I should have known my life was about to change forever. My name is Daniel Harper. I am 43 years old, and until that morning I believed I understood exactly how the world worked. Hard work brought success. Trust had to be earned, and marriage was a luxury meant for other men. For nearly 20 years I had built Harper Ridge Ranch from nothing but dust, determination, and a herd of starving cattle. What started as 500 acres had grown into nearly 12,000. Ranchers across Montana territory respected my name. Bankers trusted my word. Cattle buyers traveled hundreds of miles to do business with me. Yet despite all my success, there was one thing everyone whispered about whenever my back was turned. Daniel Harper had no family, no wife, no children, no future beyond the ranch itself. I unfolded the telegram and felt my stomach tighten. Mr. Daniel Harper, as agreed under the terms of our partnership contract, your bride will arrive on June 12th aboard the westbound train. Miss Eleanor Whitmore, age 22, will become your lawful wife. We trust this fulfills all obligations between our families. I read the message twice, then a third time. The words remained exactly the same. Eleanor Whitmore. The youngest daughter of one of the richest families in New York. The daughter nobody expected to accomplish anything. The daughter society called spoiled, lazy, and completely useless. 5 years earlier, during one of the worst droughts Montana had ever seen, I had borrowed a substantial amount of money from the Whitmore family. Their investment had saved my ranch. In return, I had signed an agreement promising marriage into their family. At the time, it seemed like a distant problem. Now that problem was riding a train directly toward my ranch. If you're enjoying this unforgettable Western romance from Legend of West, make sure you subscribe right now because the next chapter will reveal secrets that change everything. Thousands watch these stories, but only true fans subscribe before the biggest twists arrive. Don't miss what happens next. For the next 3 weeks I prepared for disaster. I imagined a delicate city, woman arriving with trunks full of dresses and expectations impossible to satisfy. I imagined complaints about the dust, the heat, the work, and the isolation. By the time June arrived, I had convinced myself that this marriage would destroy the peaceful life I had spent years creating. Then the train arrived, the station platform, buzzed with noise as passengers stepped onto Montana soil. Families reunited, merchants unloaded cargo, travelers hurried toward waiting wagons. I scanned the crowd searching for a woman surrounded by servants. Instead, I spotted someone entirely unexpected. A young woman wearing a simple dark blue travel dress stepped confidently off the train carrying a single leather bag. No servants, no expensive luggage, no frightened expression. She looked around calmly until her eyes landed on me. Then she walked directly toward me. "Mr. Harper?" she asked. "Miss Whitmore?" I replied. I was expecting someone else. A faint smile appeared on her face. Most people are. Her voice carried confidence, not arrogance. There was strength in the way she stood, and certainty in the way she spoke. She wasn't beautiful in the fragile way magazine illustrations portrayed. Wealthy women. She looked capable, determined, dangerous in a way I couldn't explain. "Before we leave," she said, "I think we should be honest with each other." "That sounds reasonable." "Good. Then let me start. I know what people say about me. They think I'm useless. They think my family sent me west because they were tired of supporting me. They think I'll fail." "And what do you think?" I asked. Eleanor's dark eyes locked onto mine. "I think they're wrong." The answer surprised me. The confidence behind it surprised me even more. During the long ride back to the ranch, she asked questions nonstop. Not questions about dresses or parties or city life. Questions about cattle prices, land ownership, feed costs, water management, labor expenses. After 2 hours, I finally asked the question that had been bothering me. Why do you know so much about business? She glanced toward the distant hills. Because while everyone else assumed I wasn't paying attention, I spent years studying my father's companies. Your father owns textile mills. A business is a business, she said. Whether you're selling fabric or raising cattle, the principles are the same. We reached Harper Ridge Ranch just before sunset. The golden light stretched across the rolling grasslands. Thousands of cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. Most visitors were impressed by the size of the operation. Eleanor studied it differently. Her eyes moved across buildings, fences, water tanks, and grazing fields. She wasn't admiring the ranch. She was analyzing it. Finally, she pointed toward the main barn. That building should have been placed closer to the livestock corrals. I frowned. Why? Because every extra minute spent moving supplies increases labor costs. She pointed toward the western pasture. And you're rotating cattle too slowly. You're losing grass quality. Then she pointed toward the water system. You're wasting money there too. I stared at her. Nobody outside the ranch had ever noticed those problems before. Most ranchers didn't notice them either. Yet within 10 minutes she had identified weaknesses I had spent years ignoring. For the first time since receiving the telegram, uncertainty replaced dread. Maybe Eleanor Whitmore wasn't the burden everyone expected. Maybe she was something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. That night after supper, she asked to see the ranch account books. As I watched her study the numbers late into the night, making notes and calculations faster than any banker I had ever met, a strange thought entered my mind. What if the woman sent here to ruin my future was actually the person destined to change it forever? The next morning, I woke before sunrise expecting to find Eleanor asleep. After all, she had traveled across half the country and spent most of the night studying account books. Instead, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with 3 ledgers open in front of her and a fresh cup of coffee beside her. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. You should be resting, I said. And you should be charging more for your breeding stock, she replied without looking up. You're underpricing your best cattle by nearly 15%. I stopped in the doorway. You've been working all night? Not all night, she said, only until 2 in the morning. Then she smiled. I slept 4 hours. That's plenty. Before I could respond, she slid a notebook across the table. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, calculations, diagrams, and observations. What is this? I asked. A list of ways to increase profitability. How many? 27. I laughed. I couldn't help it. You've been here less than 12 hours. Then imagine what I'll find after a week. For the first time in years, someone had challenged me without insulting me. Instead of criticizing the ranch, she was trying to improve it. By the end of that day, Eleanor had already begun working beside the ranch hands. Most of them didn't know what to think. A wealthy Eastern woman wasn't supposed to walk through muddy corrals or stand beneath the hot Montana sun. Yet there she was, asking questions, taking notes, and learning faster than anyone expected. Some of the men laughed behind her back. Others openly doubted her. One afternoon, a ranch hand named Carter shook his head and muttered, "No offense, ma'am, but ranching ain't something you learn from books." Eleanor calmly looked at him and said, "Neither is surviving a drought, but somehow Mr. Harper managed it." The men laughed. Carter turned red. From that day forward, nobody questioned her to her face. Weeks turned into months. Eleanor transformed nearly every part of the operation. She renegotiated supply contracts in Helena. She improved inventory tracking. She reorganized feed distribution. She even redesigned the breeding schedules to maximize herd growth. At first, I resisted some of her ideas. Many seemed too complicated. Others felt unnecessary. Yet every time I trusted her judgment, profits improved. Costs dropped. Efficiency increased. By the end of the first year, the ranch was earning nearly twice what it had before she arrived. The most surprising part wasn't her intelligence. It was her willingness to work. She wasn't directing people from an office. She was riding fences, inspecting livestock, and learning every detail of ranch life. One cold autumn morning, I found her helping repair a damaged section of fencing after a storm. Her hands were covered in dirt. Her hair had escaped from beneath her hat. She looked exhausted. "You know," I said, "wealthy women in New York don't usually spend their mornings fixing fences." She smiled. "Maybe that's why I'm in Montana." Somewhere during that first year, my opinion of Eleanor changed completely. At first I respected her, then I admired her, and eventually, without realizing it, I began looking forward to every conversation we shared, every ride across the ranch, every evening spent discussing plans for the future. One evening, we sat together on the porch watching the sunset spread across the mountains. The sky glowed orange and gold. The wind carried the scent of grass and distant rain. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked. "Of course." She stared toward the horizon. "When my father told me about this marriage, everyone expected me to refuse." "Why didn't you?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Because for the first time in my life I saw an opportunity. To marry a stranger? To build something that mattered." Her answer caught me off guard. "Back east," she continued, "everything was already built. Every decision had already been made. Every path was already chosen. Here," she looked around at the endless land stretching beyond the ranch. "Here, anything is possible." I realized then that Eleanor hadn't come to Montana because she had nowhere else to go. She had come because she wanted something more than comfort. She wanted purpose, and somehow, without planning it, we'd found that purpose together. If you're enjoying this powerful Western romance from Legend of West, subscribe now because the next chapter changes everything. The greatest challenge Daniel and Eleanor ever faced is still ahead, and only subscribers will be here when the truth is revealed. By the end of our second year together, Harper Ridge Ranch had become one of the fastest-growing operations in Montana territory. Neighboring ranchers began visiting to study our methods. Bankers who once ignored us now traveled hundreds of miles to offer investments. Newspapers even published articles about the mysterious Eastern woman transforming ranching economics. But success attracts attention, and attention attracts enemies. One afternoon, a letter arrived from New York. The moment Eleanor read it, the color drained from her face. She folded the paper slowly and slipped it into her pocket. "What is it?" I asked. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she looked directly at me. "My father is coming to Montana." "That doesn't sound so terrible." "You don't know my father?" Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard before. "And if he's coming here, it means something is wrong." For the first time since arriving at Harper Ridge Ranch, Eleanor looked afraid, and deep down, I had a feeling that whatever was coming would test everything we had built together. 3 weeks later, the man responsible for Eleanor's fear arrived at Harper Ridge Ranch. I expected a wealthy businessman with polished manners and a friendly smile. Instead, Richard Whitmore rode through the front gate looking more like a general arriving to inspect a battlefield. He was tall, stern, and carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed the world belonged to him. The moment his eyes landed on Eleanor, I saw something unexpected. It wasn't affection, it wasn't pride. It was evaluation, as though he were examining an investment. "Father," Eleanor said. "Eleanor." His voice was cold but controlled. Then his gaze shifted toward me. "Mr. Harper." We shook hands. His grip felt more like a challenge than a greeting. During supper that evening, conversation remained polite, but tension sat at the table like an unwanted guest. Richard asked detailed questions about profits, cattle numbers, land values, and business operations. Eleanor answered every question with confidence. By the end of the meal, even I could tell he was impressed despite trying not to show it. The following morning, he spent hours touring the ranch. He inspected corrals, reviewed ledgers, and questioned employees. Everywhere he looked, he found evidence of Eleanor's influence. Better systems, higher profits, smarter management. Finally, as the sun began to set, Richard asked to speak with me privately. We stood beside the north pasture overlooking thousands of grazing cattle. "You built something remarkable here," he admitted. "We built it," I corrected. "My daughter deserves most of the credit." He was silent for several moments. Then he surprised me. "Do you know why I sent Eleanor west?" "Because of our contract." "That was part of it." He sighed heavily. "The truth is that everyone in New York underestimated her, even me." I looked toward the ranch house where Eleanor was helping workers organize supplies. "That was a mistake." "Yes," he said quietly. "A very expensive mistake." That night, Richard gathered us in the living room. His expression was more serious than ever. "I didn't come here simply to visit." My stomach tightened. Eleanor folded her hands calmly. "Then why are you here?" Richard reached into his briefcase and removed several documents. "Because my company is in trouble." Silence filled the room. It was impossible to imagine one of the largest textile businesses in the East struggling. Yet the exhaustion in his face told me he wasn't lying. "Bad investments," he admitted. "Poor management decisions, several dishonest partners. We're losing money faster than we can recover it." Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. "How bad?" "Bad enough that we may lose everything within a year." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Richard looked directly at his daughter. "I need your help." Those 4 words shocked me more than anything else he could have said. A man like Richard Whitmore didn't ask for help, especially not from the daughter he had once dismissed. Eleanor sat quietly for a long time. Then she asked, "Why me?" Richard's voice softened. "Because I've spent the last 3 days studying this ranch. Because every improvement I saw came from your ideas. Because you succeeded where experienced businessmen failed." He paused. "And because I finally realized how wrong I was about you." Tears appeared in Eleanor's eyes. Not from sadness, from hearing something she had waited years to hear. Respect, recognition, belief. Over the next 6 months, everything changed. Eleanor traveled between Montana and New York, restructuring her father's company while continuing to manage ranch operations through letters and telegrams. She identified wasteful spending, removed dishonest executives, negotiated new contracts, and rebuilt the business from the ground up. It wasn't easy. Many men refused to take orders from a woman. Others openly mocked her. Yet one by one they learned the same lesson everyone in Montana already knew. Underestimating Eleanor Whitmore was a costly mistake. By the following year, the company had returned to profitability. The Whitmore family fortune was saved. Newspapers across the country began publishing stories about the brilliant businesswoman from Montana. Reporters traveled west hoping to interview her. Investors sought her advice. Politicians requested meetings. Yet none of that changed her. Every time she returned home, she rode through the ranch gates with the same smile she had worn on the day we met. She still reviewed livestock reports before breakfast. She still walked through the barns. She still believed success meant building something useful rather than collecting praise. If you're enjoying this unforgettable journey from Legend of West, subscribe now because more powerful Western stories are waiting for you. The next story may be even greater than this one, and true fans never miss a chapter. 10 years later, Harper Ridge Ranch became the largest privately owned ranching operation in Montana. Our children grew into remarkable adults. Our daughter inherited Eleanor's business brilliance. Our son inherited my love of the land. Together they expanded the family legacy beyond anything I had imagined possible. One evening, many years after that first train arrived, Eleanor and I sat on the same porch where we had once watched the sunset as newlyweds. The ranch stretched endlessly before us. Thousands of cattle grazed peacefully. The mountains glowed beneath golden light. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you stayed in New York?" I asked. Eleanor smiled and leaned against my shoulder. "No. Never? Not once." She looked out across everything we had built together. "Because this was always where I was supposed to be." I took her hand. "You know, everyone thought you were coming here to ruin my life." She laughed softly. "And instead?" I squeezed her hand. "Instead, you gave me everything." The newspapers called us the richest ranch family in Montana. Business leaders praised our success. Historians wrote about our achievements. But none of those things mattered as much as the simple truth. A rancher who thought he needed a wife discovered a partner. A woman everyone called useless proved she was extraordinary, and together they built something greater than wealth. They built a life worth remembering. That's not just a Western love story, that's a legacy.